and there my lane has been growth. Over the 2.5-ish years that I've been there, we have, with a very small team, and honestly the majority of that time with no team, grown triple digits in percentage in value. The only reason I bring that up is because that would not have been possible unless we embraced AI early on and figured out how to streamline workflows and kind of explode what a small team can do on a massive scale at a bigger organization. And that is what we'll be talking about in theory today with our experts here. And before we jump into the questions, I'd love to introduce them. So to my immediate left, we have Eric Gremminger. He's the co-founder and CEO of ERPHealth, and Eric leads a company focused on outcomes tracking and measurement-based care. Their platform helps providers capture patient-reported data, monitor progress, generate insights that support clinical decisions, and keep patients engaged in care long enough so that it can actually improve outcomes. At the end, we have Craig Thomas. He is the managing director at 𝐆𝐸_AI, and Craig sits at the intersection of admissions and operations, call center performance, and behavioral health growth. So 𝐆𝐸_AI builds behavioral health specific voice agents that support admissions workflows, from answering inbound calls to routing to follow-up to outreach. Their focus is, I think, pretty simple, but you can clarify it later. And it really is, how do you answer the calls that are getting missed? How do you capture the people who are reaching out for help and aren't getting it because they're being missed? And finally, in the middle here, we have Dan GEMP, who a lot of you may know. Dan is the founder and principal at GEMP Advisory. And Dan built Dreamscape Marketing and now speaks nationally on healthcare growth, technology, and AI. And he brings a wide view of how the patient journey is evolving, how AI is changing acquisition and conversion, and how organizations can apply AI to remove friction from the path between I need help to I'm in care. So I want to start with sort of a general level-setting conversation, and I want to focus on practical applications that we're using with AI and how providers and really anyone in the room can use those practical applications in their day-to-day. But let me start with this question to everybody on the panel. So Eric, if you don't mind, I'll start with you since you're closest to me and you're not blurry. So in your world, where is AI making the biggest measurable impact right now? And what metrics are you using to quantify that ROI?
Yeah. So from what we're seeing, the two primary, I'd say, most important metrics that AI is really having an impact are acquisition, patient acquisition, and then attrition. Now, as you mentioned in the introduction, what our company does, and kind of the viewpoint or the vantage point we have, is patient outcomes. So anytime you're having a conversation about AI, it starts really with data, right? Because your AI is only as good as your data. So understanding this entire behavioral health industry can really come down to an interaction between a person, often at their most vulnerable point in life, seeking help for a substance use disorder or a mental health condition, and on the other side of the table, a caring, qualified clinician who's capable of offering that help. Being able to measure the quality of that interaction, have the ability to improve that interaction, and then securely storing that information is the fundamental element of a good AI system in behavioral health care. Now, layered on top of that, to bring my point home, you could take that information once you've become a very proficient operator and you could prove good clinical work, and you could plug that into your website, for example, and the AI can constantly let your BD teams know, hey, we're doing a phenomenal job with males between the ages of 20 or 40 and 40. So now you're targeting your acquisition efforts, lowering your cost per acquisition, and driving referrals to your business that are qualified, which is going to feed the data and make it more rich and better, which will feed that acquisition system. Second part, attrition. So you're getting somebody in the door, how do you know whether or not they're going to stay engaged enough to stay there? And that's where systems like ours come into play. So we look at three primary variables. We look at engagement rates, we look at patient satisfaction rates, and then we look at clinical outcomes. So from an AI perspective, every 24 hours, our AI is scanning the proprietary outcomes database that the treatment center is using. It's called GROW, that we set them up with, and it's looking for trends. For example, it'll notice if a patient completed one of their assessments in 10 seconds. We know that the average is 60 seconds. So that tells us we have an engagement problem. They're just rushing through. The AI will then take another step and call on the patient satisfaction data and say, well, they only scored for counselor satisfaction and group satisfaction, they scored a 3 out of 5. Well, that's a trigger, a red flag for the system. And then it takes it a step further and says, in addition to those things, anxiety has gone up 30% for this patient. Those 3 variables, and this is kind of where it becomes an agentic capability from an AI perspective, the system notifies the clinicians and says, this person's an AMA risk. Now, there's always a human component, right? This is meant to be an assistant, but they could have a conversation and say, let's get you a new therapist, let's get you, more engaged, and that's going to reduce AMAs. So those 2 things, acquisition and attrition, I'd say.
Which I'd say are huge for the provider side, right? Because that's how many people are we getting into treatment, and then length of stay. How long are they staying?
Right.
Because you want to avoid the AMA, which that's great. So Dan, do you want to take the same question?
Yeah, and I have a unique perspective on this, right? So I worked in this space in marketing for 20 years, generated 250,000 admissions during that time through online performance marketing campaigns, right? And there's been a huge shift in not just how people should interact with AI and technology and whatnot, but what you can deliver to them, right? So those trends that AI is analyzing, you used to have to ask Google, right? What's the best treatment center near me? You're saying who, what, when, where, why, how, and then you have to take an action, right? AI is data that can do things for you. So imagine if your website is analyzing all of your clinical outcomes data. It is sending you reports on who your best clinician is based on age, gender, type of drug, type of insurance, level of care, whatever it may be, right? You are the recipient of processed data from an infinite computer, right? So it sounds cool, and there's lots of geeky advantages to this to automate and add efficiencies. What I have seen is when you take something like this outcomes data and you're trying to reduce attrition rate, you can directly ask the AI, how do I reduce my attrition rate? How do I make my clinicians better? You don't have to guess and train and put in lots and lots of human time. You can set a very simple business goal, use AI to give you the input, and if you succeed, 1 out of 10 times, 1 out of 20 times at accomplishing that goal that AI identifies and solves for you, it may be as simple as taking your outcomes data and putting it on your homepage for marketing. And now you're not wasting 20% of your Google ad spend anymore, right? Which for a lot of people is tens of thousands of dollars a month. So I would tell everyone, look at these simple goals, look at these little simple benchmarks that maybe you can make forward progress against using the data and asking AI for suggestions from the trends that it's finding.
You sort of spoke to something that I think Craig can speak to a little bit as well, where wasting of the PPC spend and driving people to call, and then sometimes admissions isn't there to answer their call. And Craig, I know that's something that you guys have solved for with RVK. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I was going to say, to me, it's the most measurable notice that we see is on the front end, right? Because, your cost per acquisitions, your digital ad spend are oftentimes next to your general payroll costs and labor costs are your biggest thing in a treatment center. So when you're paying to get the engagement of these clients and acquire them, and then losing that on the back end, or the back end of the front end, I guess you would say, it's horrifying for a business owner. So yeah, I think on the front end is the number one thing. It's through patient engagement. Through the digital spend, we're seeing it the most. It's how people are deploying ads, how they're reaching customers. But then on our end at RVK, it's like patient access. So, getting those clients that you're you're locating to somebody that can speak to your facility, that can share some of either the outcomes data or the information about your program, what are the cells to it, and being able to, essentially keep that client engaged until your team is prepared to get them into treatment. And how do we measure that, right? We measure that at RVK through kind of comparing what is the human conversion rate through your admissions team versus what is the AI's conversion rate when it answers the calls. And that's the biggest one. And you're trying to get that to as close as baseline as possible, or in some instances, we've seen it be better,
Yeah, I'd imagine, yeah. So let me move on to our next question. So, and Eric, I'll start with you again. So from what you're seeing, where is AI creating the most measurable business impact in treatment organizations today?
Well, again, I see it from a very unique lens because we truly do specialize in outcome tracking. Like, we measure, those three things. We don't do anything else. This is what the system does. It was designed that way. Like, this is a trusted source of truth for your organization where, as a third-party validator, we could advocate for you with your insurance companies, which is one ROI, potential. We could advocate for you with referral partners who are like, look, this isn't their opinion that they're a really good center, or they're not making these numbers up because we don't have a horse in the race. So, I think that's important to understand for anybody out there. When you are talking about outcomes, you don't want it to be in-house. This is something that you do want to have a company do that is purely third-party and can provide you with reporting that would be useful in contract negotiations, which we've seen a really great ROI there. Assuming you're out of network, you want to go in network, or you're in network and it's time to renew. If you have outcomes data and you could show that you outperform the other network participants with that Aetna, with that Blue Cross, you have a really good chance of getting a better rate. And that could scale really quickly, that extra $100 per person, that could get very interesting very quickly. But for us, what we've seen is AMA. So it is such a huge problem for facilities who are paying $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 cost per acquisition to get somebody in the door, and then they're leaving halfway through their stay. So as I mentioned, what our system does, it identifies when individuals are at risk, and we engage directly with the patient. So these are patient-reported outcome measures. So there's actually a lot of information happening beneath the surface at your center that you're completely unaware of. We make that visible to your clinicians. And I'll just give you an example. We did a case study. You could find it on our website, ERPHealth.com. But basically, it's a facility. They were using us, but at a very low capacity, and their AMA rates were like 30, 40%. We got them retrained, really using the system and using the AI within the system to notify their teams when somebody was at risk. It dropped to below 10% AMA rate, which is significant. Just to put some numbers to that, $500 average daily reimbursement number. Person's pre-approved for 10 days. So that's $5,000 potential revenue. After 5 days, our system notices, again, that they're completing assessments way quicker than anybody else. That tells the system they're lacking engagement. Their satisfaction is lower than the standard. We have one of the largest and cleanest outcome-specific databases in the industry that all of the data is being compared to, so that you're getting information where you're like, well, we're below the norm here, we should do something. And then anxiety is high. Well, if we get that intervention right, that person stays the entire time. That's $2,500 we saved for your top line. The facility I'm referencing in the case study is a very large facility. 100 of those, instances over the course of the year, we're talking, $250,000. Like, these numbers add up, and it is a plug-and-play system. So that's like the benefit of outcome tracking. It's easy to just categorize it as clinical, when in fact it has a compounding effect across the entire business operation.
To add to that, I've actually seen better business happening, right? So I work as a fractional chief AI officer. I get to be in a lot of boardrooms that I didn't have the privilege of being in before. And it's really interesting to see more informed goal setting happening, right? People actually can conclude what to do with the data or what to ask the data, right? Oh, I want to reduce my AMA rate. I want to reduce how many people just walk out of treatment after 12 days. Well, if you do that by a certain percentage, by 20%, you will make 20% more revenue. Huge, huge amounts of change for your business, right? If the goal is to miss 0 calls, right? And that could be an ethical goal too, right? If someone is calling me for life-saving help and I don't pick up the phone, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. That person might not be alive in 5 minutes. So whether it's an ethical and clinical mission or a business growth mission, right? If you have your stats, most treatment centers are missing 20 to 30% of their total call volume. And they're paying for marketing to generate those calls. They're paying a lot of outreach reps to go around and generate relationships. And so the cost of that, you're just getting pure waste on 20 to 30% of your outreach payroll, of your marketing budget. This goes across all business categories, right? So common sense. I mean, Eric is talking about base level uses for AI in your business, right? How do I just reduce, how quickly someone leaves? How do I get them to stay for the full continuum of care? But then you can set a goal to advertise it. The longer they stay, you can advertise that 40% increase in length of stay since 2023, right? Put it on your homepage. And I think you can set simple goals too. Because search engines are shifting towards AI, branding is back in play. It's not just SEO or PPC or all this digital marketing anymore. You can say, hey, I'd like to see my brand mentioned on the internet 25% more this year. That's how I will know if my sales and marketing are working. That's also how AI knows to trust you and put you in those magic AI search results more and more frequently, right? So I think that some of the best ROI I've seen in the space is coming from just better goal setting and business 101 applications of AI technology.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, when you think about, like you said, with the digital ad spend, I mean, when you spend all that money on all those marketing campaigns, even the boots on the ground campaigns, and then you consider just the information, the data that you lose by just not obtaining that from the caller, right? So when the caller calls and says, hey, Dan Gem's marketing agency referred us, just that data alone is skewing, how you're looking at your numbers every month or quarter alone. So, and that's not even to consider like actually acquiring a client. I think that goes to, a lot of what we talk to consumers about it or customers about with RVK is that they assume that we're looking to displace, their humans with AI, right? And that's really just like not the case. It's you're trying to essentially bolster and give them more time so that they can do what they were trained to do, what they're really good at. Whether that's on your admissions team and closing high-value leads and following up with patients and doing those sorts of things, whether that's your marketers out in the field, freeing up time for them, whether that's on the clinical side, like with ERP, with giving time for your clinicians to have access to information without obtaining it, so that they can have FaceTime with your clients. It's really like AI is meant to, what I try to explain to people is AI is meant to be like a force multiplier for your facility, right? It's meant to accentuate the things that you're really good at, and then in the instances where you do have deficiencies, it's meant to kind of help fill those gaps and free time for you to help, correct those things,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that obviously what you guys do there at RVK is we're helping out and sort of filling the gaps in answering the phone calls that you're paying to call in, right? On the clinical side, what we see a lot of, and I was talking to Dr. Wind, who's the Chief Clinical Officer at JourneyPure, which is a pretty big facility company here in the US, and they just noticed that they were saving so much time because they were utilizing AI with clinical summaries and behavioral charting and stuff like that. And so what he did was he took that clinician time and refocused it on a procedure that he calls his AMA blocking procedure. It's a 2-day process. If someone wants to leave, that they have to go through an order to leave. Because he was utilizing that time savings that he was getting from the clinical documentation AI that we provide them, the length of stay impact of that, as you kind of talked to when you mentioned, when you were talking before, Eric, the amount of revenue that impacted because it went from like a 24-day length of stay to a 27-day length of stay over 25 facilities. That's in the millions of dollars every year. So there's a lot of really interesting ways that I'm seeing people actually in the space using AI, but not in the way you think, where it's, yes, it's saving them time, but then what are you having your staff do with that extra time? And how can you implement systems and processes to capture some lost revenue out of that? And honestly, improve patient care, because the longer someone's in, the more positive the outcomes typically are. But Craig, let me jump to you for our next question. We'll start with you. So if a treatment organization wants to measure results in the next 90 days, what's the first AI use case you'd implement or you suggest they would implement, and why?
Well, I guess my first point would be like, where is your organization deficient? I think, today, my suggestion to anybody that asks about AI, whether it's about RVK or Sunwave or ERP or any of the providers that I know out there that use AI, it's always, where are you deficient, right? Like if your clinical team is struggling to have time to complete notes and get in front of patients and do like the real work and AMA block and meet with families and call people back, then, you really want to focus there, I think. If your alumni program is, maybe not that strong and you don't see a lot of, engagement or re-engagement, or you don't have a big enough treatment center to have an alumni department yet, then somebody like ERP can come in and really give you, that extra, kind of kick to get your organization there. Because I think, it's one thing to kind of look and I can say, oh yeah, RVK, and you want to you're paying to acquire clients and you want to get admissions, but what we see when we operate these facilities, and I operated a facility for a long time, is when you have like a weak spot that can get accentuated really easily and really cause problems. So you really want to look at your organization from like a practical standpoint and say, like, what do we need to kind of fix to get to baseline? And I think once you're there, once you have a really strong clinical program and you kind of have the full kind of operational baseline, that's when you can say, okay, we really want to go after something like RVK and try to make sure that our admissions flow is dialed in and we can get everything that we're capturing.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, do you want to?
I'd chime in and just say that time saving is the simplest approach, right? So as you go department by department, you're trying to analyze, hey, where do I apply AI in my business? Look at maybe the HR department, and they need to create X number of job descriptions per month. Well, just upload every job title and job description you have into a little agent, and then it'll take you 10 seconds from now on to generate job descriptions, right? Or your marketing department is generating emails and invites to lunch and learn events and such. Spend 15 minutes to build a multi-touch email campaign that you can use forever, right? So go department by department, role by role, and look into just time saving first, and make sure that all of your team members know they will only be rewarded for that. You're not looking to replace them with AI. You are looking to amplify them into a superhuman that can do 100 things an hour, right? And that can only increase their value to you, especially if they become a savvy AI user. So think about that too, right? This compounding value. You can take one key employee and you're like, oh, I wish I had 10 of that guy. Wish I had 10 Erics monitoring my outcomes. You can have 1.1 million Erics monitoring your outcomes using AI. It's pretty cool.
It's funny because something I said to you the other day, I think like, if you're looking at the first 90 days, like how do I use AI, I think it speaks to like where is the industry going as a whole, right? And I think, like I said it to you, it's like we're going from like a reactive industry, right? Like the phone rings, we answer it, we miss the call, we call them back. The person tries to leave treatment, we sit down with them and try to AMA block, to a more responsive or proactive approach, and we do that with AI. And by making sure that we don't miss any calls, making sure that clinicians are educated with data that they may not have already had through touch points, in the clinical treatment, that would have normally come just from face-to-face interaction or somebody saying, hey, Todd's going through this, go sit with them. But now like AI is giving them the opportunity to have that data in their hand, everybody at your treatment center, in real time. And I think that's, kind of like where we're going, I think,
Yeah, I would just add to that. If I was from a 90-day perspective, having an AI strategy, just speaking from our company, having an AI advisor like Dan, somebody that's thinking about this. I mean, this is a big, somewhat complicated subject. You have to have kind of that person in your corner who is seeing it from the 30,000-foot view and offering, good perspective on where you should move forward with it. And I would also just say, having your own proprietary outcomes database, every other treatment center has or can get almost everything else that you have from a commodity perspective, like what you could buy on the market. What's unique to your organization, the unique footprint, is how well your staff, clinician and staff, are doing with the care of your patients. And those are very proprietary, specific numbers. But once you have those numbers from an AI strategy perspective, think about the other technologies that you have, the other parts of your tech stack. We have a great integration with Sunwave, but like an admissions tool, 𝐀𝐝𝐬𝐬𝐲𝐫𝐞. Okay, somebody calls your admissions line, you have all this proprietary data, you integrate with the front end, and all the admissions person has to do is say, on the other end of the phone is a mom who's looking for care for their 19-year-old daughter who has an opioid problem. Say that into the system. Immediately, the system says, our treatment center has a 45% success rate in reducing depression and maintaining that reduction. Patients who meet this profile are satisfied to the level 4.7 and have a 98% engagement rate. So rather than saying, you should come to my treatment center because we have, this and this and this, master level therapist, I got news for you. You have to have master level therapists. Like, that is not necessarily a value add. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to invest in that. But what's unique to your organization is how this amazing staff that you probably have assembled are performing, and then leveraging that with your other technologies to improve the business.
Yeah, thank you. Can I pause for a second and ask you all just a quick poll? How many of you use AI every day for your job? So 3, 4, 5.
Or personally, right?
I use it every day, all the time. I want to talk to something that Dan and I have honestly yelled.
I'm using it right now.
Same, kind of, and I'll tell you what I mean. I realized when I first got into leadership roles that it wasn't my job to do the job. It was my job to build the systems for the people we hired to do the job. And then in 2023, when I started at Sunwave, ChatGPT launched. And I realized I could build those systems into ChatGPT and get it to do what an employee could do. So that's one of the ways, and this doesn't work for everything. Obviously, it has to be HIPAA compliant, but I work in marketing. So I don't really have to worry about that so much because it's like page copy and how do I build a one-pager that really engages people. So I build in the best practices that I know and then just say, I need a one-pager about this, here's the relevant data, and it spits it out. Instead of it taking me an hour, it took me 15 minutes, to do that. And it's all about knowing how to build that system and how to build the custom GPT or work with AI companies that are building custom things. Like, again, Dan and I have been yelling at each other over many dinners about the things that we've done because there's so much you can do that doesn't really cost all that much, and it gives you so much time to focus on the stuff that you really got to get done. Sorry.
I was going to add, we had a conversation once. Todd was working on marketing for Sunwave's AI technology, right? So it takes notes as you speak in a clinical session. It takes notes and puts them in your medical records. And I was like, wow, what a great time-saving tool that is. But then he pointed out to me, actually, it's a compliance tool because you won't have human error. Oh, and it's a billing tool. Your reimbursement rates, when you have clean charts and good note-taking, will be way higher than having to do manual billing and collect notes later, right? And so it's interesting, some of these AI tools, they actually compound on themselves, right? If you solve the right problem, you might solve multiple problems that result just from people being a little bit inefficient.
Can I reveal a maybe possibly embarrassing fact about that? I learned that insight from ChatGPT when I was creating our positioning documentation on our AI back in 2023 when we launched it. I was like, obviously time savings, but what are some other unseen maybe implications of this? And that was one that I got. I learned from ChatGPT. Anyway.
Well, no, that's a good point.
I'm also real smart, I promise. But use your tools. Dan, I'm going to start the next question with you. So when leaders ask for sort of the return on investment, which is, as you know, in the boardrooms, that's what they care about, what metrics actually matter most and what ones are commonly misleading?
Sure, so I'm going to be careful with this because the metrics are wildly different for every group that I work with. And I think it's going to come down to your goal setting for the business. If you're in a business cycle where you're in a rapid growth stage, then you want to minimize wasted marketing spend. That would be a key metric, right? Because that could be millions. And you're going to want to maximize call handling, right? So solutions to those goals might be, hey, in the next 30 days, we need to deploy RVK to answer all the calls, and we need to audit our Google Ads campaign to make sure we're not wasting 50 grand a month, right? So I would say that the metrics will change business by business and depending on what part of the business cycle you're in. If you're gearing up for acquisition, you should be making a series of AI plans on how to run lean and maximize profitability and get all those accounts receivable in. So you're going to be working on billing and note-taking and accuracy of records. So to give some simple metrics, like goals that I see that are common across clients, no missed calls. And that could be a staffing issue, and you use AI for the staffing, or it could be a technology solution. Additional days, right? So how do you get your average length of stay up? You've already acquired the patient. Why are they leaving 2 days sooner than they have to? That could be an outcomes-based solution, and you're using your clinical data, or that's a staffing problem too, and you have the wrong clinicians. They're not invested in keeping that patient in care, which is pretty bad because the more someone stays in care, the higher their long-term success rate is. That is known data. And I would go back to the brand mentions that I listed earlier. The more people want to work for you, the more they'll talk about you on social media. The more you're present at events and in the community, the bigger your brand will get and the more people will refer to you. And the more you're invested in your alumni, with maybe a 100% alumni communication rate, right, key benchmark, the more readmissions you'll get if someone trusts you with their care and you're doing wellness checks and using AI for that sort of thing. And the more referrals you'll get to their family and friends that are in need of care.
I hope someone answers that door, but do you want to take this question too, or would you want to move on to the next one?
No, I think he did a great answer for that.
Yeah, Craig.
Yeah, I mean, the one I was thinking of that I think, that we talk a lot about with providers is really the cost of like human labor versus your AI cost. And your leverageable AI cost, because again, this goes back to your ability when you use AI to create efficiencies to gain more time for oftentimes for all your staff really, but you're really trying to gain it for your high value staff or your higher paid staff where that labor cost is higher. And it's not so much a metric more than like an idea, but that's super important. And the reason is because your AI cost is fixed, right? Like your labor cost is going to fluctuate based on, okay, our census is going up, we need to hire more staff, then, you have these kind of thresholds that you're going to climb. But with AI, those efficiencies are fixed. So it's immediately kind of like innumerably scalable, right? And that's something to kind of always take into effect is like, or taking it into your thought process is like, okay, if we go through the pain points of implementing this now, it becomes kind of like the sky's the limit with scalability. And when, to Dan's point, like if you're trying to grow, that's, invaluable,
For acquisitions, there is a number for that, right? The capital groups want to see a very specific AI enablement level. And so they're looking for the cost that would have been payroll, right? Okay, you had 3 employees answering 900 phone calls, and now you're answering 1,800 phone calls. You've doubled that, but your cost was a few $1,000s a month for an AI solution as opposed to 3 more salaries, right? So you can put like a bot equivalent labor number, right? Call it whatever you want. I just made that up 10 seconds ago. So that number, that conversation comes up from capital groups that are trying to evaluate your level of AI enablement.
We only have about 6 more minutes, and I wanted to talk about where we see kind of the future of AI going, because where it was 2 years ago, I didn't expect it to be where it is here now. And even just from what we've been talking about, Dan, you talked about how we're kind of nerds, you and I, for building sort of unique custom tools to help us do certain things. And you were talking about using the outcomes tracking data to help sell that mom who wants to get their daughter to go to treatment, and using that. How long is it before we'll have a tool that Dan built in his garage for fun that takes the transcript of the call in real time and delivers positioning statements to that person taking the phone call to help close that sort of sale, for lack of a better term?
I can't predict it, but I don't expect it to be that long. If you look at like how quickly these AI tools are kind of improving, the question is, and I think it's almost, it's worth it, something I think about. Think about yourself as an example. If you're a business, like, especially this time of year, New Year's, I say, what would the future Eric be thankful that the present Eric is doing today?
Well, he's a robot, so I don't know.
Well, for me, it's about eating right, prioritizing family, little things like that. But I think about that. Now, from a business perspective, you could ask the same exact question. What would my future business thank my present business for doing today? And to answer your question, if vibe coding or being able to create your own proprietary speech to development software is going to be an option, and there's a good chance it's going to be, what did I invest in the outcomes data, the only unique differentiator that I could possibly have, my outcomes data, did I invest in that today? Did I decide to onboard outcome tracking capabilities today so that by the time that happens, I have enough data, hundreds of thousands of clinically validated data points that are unique to my organization, that I could plug into this vibe coding, machine that was created in my garage to help drive admissions? Because otherwise, your only option will be to tap into an LLM that exists in the market that everybody has access to. Like that would be such a missed opportunity if you're just plugging in, or calling on ChatGPT or calling on Claude or whatever it might be, because like your organization is unique, and that uniqueness is going to help you to stand apart in a sea of sameness in the next 3 to 5 years. So make that decision today would be my recommendation.
I think it's pretty obvious. Just do what Craig did and build a lang chain vector database and make sure it's SOC 2 compliant.
Boom.
Duh. Right?
Boom.
I think that the place to start, what feeds that technology, is a knowledge base. You can start to compile this for your company. You should have a simple AI platform, pick any one that's commercially available, that has all of the knowledge of your business in it, all of the content from your website, your org chart with every title, job description, level of reporting, blah, 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 your financials, possibly gated for key people to access, and your business plan. And you can have AI generate the business plan and then measure your progress as you go, right? And you can integrate Salesforce and your EHR systems and all of that together to get a full profile. But that concept is new in this space, and it's not in other industries. Google's been doing this for years. IBM has been doing this for years. But what you can do is just start compiling that department by department and feeding it into the brain of this supercomputer. And a year from now, as the supercomputer is 10 times faster, stronger, smarter, and it's driving your car here for you, right? It will also be sending you reports on how to perform better.
Can I piggyback on that really quick? Because I want to point out that when you're building out that data set, you want to make sure it's good, clean data, outcomes data, whatever it is, because have you guys ever heard the adage, garbage in, garbage out? My mom used to say that to me when I was like listening to music she didn't like as a kid. But like that is a rule that I apply towards everything I build in AI, because if I'm building bad processes or building bad systems, it's going to give me bad outcomes. So I think that that's kind of very important when you're building out that data set. Make sure it's good, actionable data. But Craig, do you mind if I have you answer where you think AI is going to be going in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, where is it going? I mean, I think, said simply, it's already kind of going from what was an innovation maybe 12, 18 months ago for some people to a necessity. And I think, as we get to the next, I mean, really, it's hard to speak to the timeline, but like within the next year or two, it's going to be an operational necessity for organizations in any industry, but specifically in ours, for a variety of reasons, a lot of which we already talked about. And I think, you know, the key thing too, a lot of times is, like I said, but like trying to evaluate where in your organization you can use it, where there's a necessity, where there's deficiency. You know, with RVK, a lot of times, you know, we're approached by customers for, you know, our very specific use cases, but one of the things that like I always communicate to them is like, give me something we can help you with, right? Like we've compiled some really, really super talented engineers, and, you know, what they don't know about behavioral health, I can, you know, kind of alliterate to them very easily and communicate with, like, so we want to solve all these different use cases. And to the thing that you mentioned, right, like how close are we to, you know, the AI being able to listen to call? I mean, we already have that. We're developing for, you know, an enterprise level client now where it can listen to your live admissions people's calls and give feedback. I mean, with any call that RVK answers on your admission side now, it's already grading itself, right? It's already listening to itself. It already has metrics that it's kind of like grading itself against. So that's a key feature that, you know, we're working on right now.
And I bet that people who, even if you have call tracking metrics and it records your calls, you can see now, well, who are my best call takers? What are they doing? What are their skill sets? Like, what are they using to help bring people into treatment? And you could have, I've built out custom GPTs for similar things. You can have ChatGPT break down what they're doing. Like, you don't have to know exactly what they're doing. The tools can help you learn that yourself and then build systems to train the rest of the team on what they're doing. So you can use it in ways that I'd never really considered 2 years ago. It's been pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point with call tracking metrics, because there are all a lot of huge platforms. Dan mentioned Google, you're saying CTM, that have a lot of similar AI capabilities than we would think to use in our organizations. But what we're seeing more now is how is that tailored to our niche environment, right? And that's the important part, because yes, like CTM can do some things that RVK does, right? But I'm very clearly going to say they very clearly do not do them at the level we do. And the reason is because people like myself and other people in the organization have been in behavioral health for 15, 20 years. We understand the nuance, and we understand how to tailor that specific use case to, you know, our industry. And that's going to happen more and more, I think, in the coming year or years with AI, where you're going to see, you know, it become very niche to specific things, you know.
I think the difference between what you guys do and what I described is that you guys have access to best practices over a ton of different organizations instead of just one. So that's the benefit of that. The bigger the skill set, or the bigger the database of skill set, the more impact you're going to have, because it's going to pull out the best of what you have access to.
One more piece of advice. Anyone that says they're amazing at AI and they're going to come work for you and vibe code, bro, do not hire them. They're a vulnerability to your business valuation. Yeah. There is no such thing as a whiz kid. A lot of these people are charlatans who figured out how to make simple tools and widgets, and they can mimic the functionality of software, but they don't have the liability, the compliance built in. You are legally exposed with HIPAA compliance depending on how they built your database, but they used AI to build your database, so it may not be compliant, right?
They probably don't know how to answer
know
those questions. Yeah.
So be very, very reluctant if you have this whiz kid in your employment. Maybe they're a phenomenal employee that's got that compound value to you, but do not build your business infrastructure and put your future valuation stakes on that person.
Well, guys, that is our time. So thank you so much for joining us for this panel. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you want, please come talk to us afterwards. We're happy to chat.